Hello, everybody, and welcome to another webinar in our Moving Forward series. I'm JJ McMurtry, Dean of Liberal Arts and Professional Studies at York University, and thank you so much for joining us. A special welcome today to our guest panelist, Melissa Grello, and thank you also to our host, Sean Courage. You'll be hearing more from them shortly. I'd like to now acknowledge the land that we are on. This meeting is virtual, and because of that, we are not all actually gathered in the same space. York's land acknowledgement might not represent the territory that you are currently on. And I would ask, if this is the case, that each of you take the responsibility to acknowledge the traditional territory that you are on and its current treaty holders. I myself am situated in the area known as Takaranto, and so gratefully acknowledge my presence on the same territory as York University. As a member of the York University community, I recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. York acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Takaranto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. So welcome again to our guest panelist, Melissa Grello, and to everybody joining us here. During this panel, we will get to learn about Melissa's career journey, which began as a freshly minted York University graduate and has led her into diverse experiences as a prominent media professional at the forefront of many issues facing Canada and the world in recent years. If at any time you need to help with this experience or have questions about the content, please feel free to click on the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. Our team is here and ready to help you. So that's all from me. Now I'd like to hand things over to Associate Dean Sean Courage, who will lead the discussion. Thanks, Sean, and thanks, everybody.
Thanks, JJ, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our latest in our Moving Forward series. Really excited today to be speaking with our guest, Melissa Grello, who we're going to learn a little bit about her career. We're going to talk a little bit about the experience of working in broadcast media during a pandemic and more. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Melissa Grello, a co-host of CTV's The Social. Hi, Melissa.
Oh, hey. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate this. We've got a great audience here. Maybe there's some Moving Forward fans out there who've been attending all of these sessions. So, but I'm sure there's plenty of people who came here just to see you specifically. So why don't we start things off by giving the audience a bit of a sense of your career journey. We've been speaking with alumni who are in a bunch of different and interesting roles as sort of leaders in their sectors. And so we're curious to hear about your journey from graduating as a York graduate with a degree in psychology and a bachelor's of education to where you are today in your role at CTV.
Yeah, long and circuitous route, and so extraordinarily ordinary in many, many ways. Listen, I was born and raised as the daughter of two immigrants, my mother from the Philippines and my father from Portugal. And I was born and raised in the country on a horse farm, but regardless of what my father was doing as his living and my mother who was working for the government, education. It was drilled in me from a very young age, from my mother in particular, that university was always the goal. And so as I traveled through my life and education career, I did always have my sights on a post-secondary education and specifically university. So once, probably midway through through high school, and the big questions about what are you going to do with your life started to arise. For me, I was already coaching horseback riding through my family business, and teaching was something that became very, very naturally to me. I'm also a firstborn. I don't want to get into too much psychology, even though I have a degree in it, but there was a lot of that firstborn pressure, both self-imposed and from the family, to be the first in the family to go to university in Canada and excel. And so teaching was a very natural place for me to go. But I also was fascinated by psychology, and that was really influenced by several teachers in high school. So there I was, and it was pretty clear to me that I wanted and really, I'm a homebody by nature. So staying close to home I was born and raised in Caledon, Ontario. That was going to be a really sort of one of the top 3 factors that would help me decide on the school that I would apply to. And in the end, it was York University. And even though I spent my first year in residence, Bethune, what's up? I did end up spending the rest of my 2 degrees commuting. And the fact that that was an option was a really, really big deal to me. It did still allow me to work specifically on the family farm. So that's how I sort of found my way into psychology and into teaching into York University. And it was a great fit. And I think the greatest thing for me was, the banner, interdisciplinary education. I was always somebody who really prided herself on, being flexible and being able to wear many hats and knowing a little bit about a lot of things. And I really enjoyed that so many of the programs, particularly in arts, really allowed for that interdisciplinary approach to education. And so I think that has served me in so many ways in my life today, because I do feel like I've got a solid foundation in a bunch of things, thanks to my university degree. And then when university was done, listen, teaching, I'm so passionate about teaching, and I went straight into teaching as soon as I had graduated. It was in the private system, but then quickly I was like, I'm going to go and do my, master's in education. And I didn't complete it. And we may get to that a little bit later, but that's where my career took a left turn into journalism, which started to become a new interest of mine in terms of being considered as a career choice. And that is when I went on to study. I did a very quick diploma program in broadcast journalism. And then, as they say, the rest is history. So in a condensed way, I got my entire foundation really in terms of how I approach life and how I approach research today in my job. That is in large part due to the way that York University approaches education in the first place.
I think that's really interesting to hear that broadcast journalism wasn't the first career path you had thought about when you were going into post-secondary education. And that's, I think, really valuable for a lot of our students and our recent graduates, who many will go into careers, directly connected to what they did in their undergraduate studies, but many more will take that left turn and go into a new area as they discover something new. Are there skills or competencies you think you got out of your arts education and your BEd that you think you still use in your current career in broadcast?
I think, let me check every single one of the skills that I learned. The reason why I say that is I think when I look back and what you just mentioned about the fact that I didn't start my education in university with the goal of doing what I do today as a job. And I think that that's a really maybe easier thing for me to say at this stage in my journey than saying to someone who's either going into university or just starting university and saying, don't worry, take some chances. You're going to like this. Maybe you're not going to like it. Don't worry about it. You can toss it out the window. Like that kind of stuff. It's a financial commitment. It is a time commitment. There could be family pressures. Like in some ways I experience, like there's a lot of pressure you feel in your late teens, early 20s, that every decision you make at that moment of your life is going to change the entire trajectory of your life. And in some cases, it is true. I know in my experience, the fact that I can look back and say, no education that you attain is ever, ever, ever wasted. And I say that because I would not be where I am in my career doing what I do, and I think excelling in the way that I do, without the fact that I have this entire base and skill set and foundation through a degree that technically I'm not using today, but I am using every single thing that I learned in a different field. And so education is never a waste. And when I look back, I think, thank God that my journey took me that way, because when you're a broadcaster and you're in news and you're in journalism, what matters? It's all the skill set that I have learned, not only with my psychology degree and certainly understanding people and understanding storytelling, understanding different perspectives, that there is, so many ways to experience one story. The fact that I love reading and writing, and gosh, I love grammar and punctuation. Gosh, do I love that stuff. And guess what? a must in journalism. You've got to know how to write. You've got to be well read. You've got to know how to research. You've got to be passionate about that stuff. You've got to know how to command an audience. You have to provide information in a way that is compelling, that is exciting, in a way that maybe jars people into action. Guess what? That's what I had to do with my grade 7s and 8s. Do you know how hard it is to teach a grade 7 and 8 split class? You are basically dancing and spinning plates and juggling at the same time to be like, hey, competing with your video games over here. And so there is an entire skill set that you learn year after year in your programs, in your practicums. And it's not about learning the information per se, it's about learning how to learn. And I really got that in spades. And so to me today, I simply wouldn't be where I am. And I don't think I would have moved through my career to the different levels that I have attained in a short time if I already didn't have life experience and the degrees and the teaching under my belt. When I decided to make a left turn to go into journalism, I came in there really like with purpose and driven and focus, because I already had a lot of life under my belt.
Yeah, and it speaks to a certain adaptability, I think, that you get out of your undergraduate education that gives you that ability to pivot and move towards a career that really is speaking to your interests as you start to find your own path and your own journey. And I can see already from our audience, we're starting to get questions, which is great. There is a Q&A tool down at the bottom of the screen for everyone. If you want to start posting your questions in there, I'm going to start channeling them up here to Melissa as we go along. But as we wait for more of those questions to come in, we wanted to hear a little bit about what your experience has been like over the past year during the pandemic in your sector. How has CTV, how have your shows had to adapt to production during a work from home situation? What does that look like for an on-air personality?
Oh my gosh, how much time do you have, Sean? How much time? We are at year 3,700 of the pandemic. That's what it feels like anyway for me working from home. Listen, I will share that I feel very lucky. I feel very privileged that I still have a job in this pandemic. I want to start because I'm about to whine is what I'm basically saying is I'm about to whine and complain. But I do want to start off by saying that I am very lucky. There are a lot of people who have lost their jobs and more in this pandemic. For me, even though I feel so blessed that I'm still working, it is hard. It's hard, it's hard, it's hard. And for probably the same reasons that anybody who's working from home, even learning from home, is probably experiencing, because your life went from maybe having, the silos. So I work, or I'm a student, I'm a parent over here, and the worlds didn't mix. My life is now a nebulous blob of life. It's work, it's my daughter, it's my husband, it's, living in this basement for the last year. And that's been really challenging. So, this is how resilience is built though, right? So I'm whining on the one hand, but the challenge has been for us on the social, a technological one. I do not believe that we would have been able to pull off what we've been doing for the show had it been 5 years ago. Like, I don't know that bandwidth would have been what it needed to be to pull off a show like ours, where there's anywhere from 4 to 5 hosts. We are bringing in guests from all over the world. The technology has advanced to the point that we can do that. It's not perfect, but it's great. We were only down for the first 2 weeks of the pandemic in last March. Otherwise, we've been on the air the entire time. We do have a few little hiatus, like a little summer break, a little Christmas break here and there, but otherwise we've been up on the air, and it has been a massive team effort. And what it looks like here, right? Because I've got my art up. I want to make sure my pillows are perfect and all these things. I want you to see what I'm looking at on that side of the camera, on the other side, so that you can see that it looks great here. Life's all together, but much like the rest of us, what's happening below the waist is pajama pants. Up here is dressy. So let me show you the below the waist shot of my technological studio setup.
Okay.
So it's basically gadgets up. We got gadgets absolutely everywhere. And so lighting is the key to life. So this is what I'm looking at. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2 more lights that you don't see. I've got 7 lights in my basement, which is also where I run a small business out of. That's lovely. I have got screens. I've got the iPads. I have gotten 2 sets of AirPods. I've got 2 cell phones. I mean, the gadgetry. I have a green screen because we do a lot of stuff where it's, if we don't want to be in our studio, we can put us anywhere in the world. So this is what I'm looking at. So a hot mess on the other side of the camera. But if we can switch back to me, because oh look, aren't I such a together person? I have it
Looks
all
great.
together. I have a 7-year-old. I have a husband who's been working outside of the home like this entire time. I've not seen him less. Life is in shambles, Sean. So, so the reality and what you see are 2 very different things. Again, very fortunate that I'm working. I don't want to sound like I'm not grateful, but it is hard. And so my daughter, for many reasons, we've chosen to keep her at home virtual schooling. And so trying to do a job where physically I can't do anything else when I'm on camera with you or I'm on camera shooting the show. I physically can't do anything. I'll give you a great example. Last week, my daughter was at home, and what I'll do when I'm shooting is I set her up with all her work. This is why my background as a teacher is amazing, because we opted out of the synchronous learning, which is the live online learning with a teacher. And instead, the teacher provides the schoolwork, and then we do it on our own time. But my daughter Marqueza, she's so lucky that mom used to be a teacher, because I create, in addition to the work for school, my own lesson plans. I'm very lucky. She's academically, she's a little sponge. So I set her up with all her work for the day, or at least the few hours that I need to be here. So yes, last week we were getting ready to shoot the show. We were literally counting down 10, 9, 8. And my daughter was working right on top in the floor above me. And I hear boom, 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 boom. And then I hear a scream, just a blood curdling scream. 2 weeks prior to that, she had fallen down the stairs. So imagine my brain. I'm about to do the show. Okay, da, da, da. And then I hear that. I jumped up, I ran upstairs. She had fallen off the couch because she runs on top of the couch like a little zoo animal, and she fell off and she whacked her head. She was okay. But then I said to her, here's the ice. Are you okay? There was no bruising or swelling. She was just a little scared, continued with her work. I went back downstairs. And then I went like this. And 10, 9, 8, like this is what life looks like now. And so I never had to do that when I was in the studio. And so that's one story, and I'm lucky that I have other, options and networks to support me. So listen, I told you I was going to, I'm whining a lot more than I thought I would. Sorry about that. But yeah, it's not easy. And again, I have it pretty good compared to a lot of people. I want to acknowledge that, but it's still not easy.
It's super interesting to hear too, also about the setup. Some people in the audience might be interested in, what your tech setup is there. So it was great to be able to share that image so you can see the other side of the camera. Because I will say, and we've had great guests on this series, but you probably have the best lighting in camera shot that we've seen on Zoom. So it's pretty good.
It's national TV grade.
My last question before we go to the audience, I guess is a question about what your experiences, thoughts, or observations are on journalism over this past year. What are the kinds of things that you've seen? Is the profession changing and responding to how the world has changed in the last 12 months?
It has been rough. I think the first thing that comes to mind is globally in the last year, the assault on journalism. And I think it is a very terrifying time in many ways to be a journalist, depending on where you are in the globe. And in fact, not just like the over there's of the world where, there's historically been a real crackdown on journalism and freedom of the press, but we've witnessed so much of it on this side of the ocean, particularly under the Trump administration with, calling journalists the enemy of the people and being the northern neighbor. I have a saying that when America sneezes, Canada catches a cold. And a lot of the sentiment of the anti-press, anti-journalism, the conspiracy theories, the questioning of truth itself, that has really spilled over into Canada as well. We shouldn't kid ourselves. And so the fact that the border's closed, but ideas don't need borders, and the idea of questioning the very value of science, of truth, that is very much under attack. And so it has been very hard as a journalist now, even whether you're in this country trying to cover an anti-masking rally or an anti-vaxxer rally, and in the United States now, where there's now, of course, the added layer, if you are a journalist, of what we are all reckoning with, which is lack of diversity in the storytellers and the stories then being told. So to layer on top of, for example, covering racial unrest and all of the protests, et cetera, to also be a journalist of color, specifically a Black or Indigenous, reporter in the field, where you are probably already in the minority in your newsroom. There is now the added layer of the mental toll of covering this kind of trauma that is taking its toll in your brain and in your body in some cases as well. So there's a lot converging on journalism right now, not only the stories, the complex stories that have to be told, but also who's covering them, the battle to diversify newsrooms across this country. Don't just have to look at the states, diversifying newsrooms in this country. If there are people who are watching who have any desire to follow journalism and to tell more stories, different stories, it is now that we need you more than ever. And especially if you are a person of color, especially if you are any of the quote unquote minority groups, if you are disabled, if you are trans, if you are Indigenous, if you are female, there are stories that need to be told. It's not easy. I will have to say that these days it is not, in some circles, the easiest environment to be working in, but now more than ever, I feel like journalists and good journalists, passionate journalists, are needed in this industry.
So we're getting some questions that I think are related to this topic. Kareem asks, how much do you think we've progressed with racial and social justice from 1 year ago? And how do we help inspire change? And I think maybe that might be from a sector perspective, or maybe your perspective more broadly in Canada.
Okay. How much have we progressed? I mean, I guess if you consider talking about it, progress, I think, the discussion has been cracked wide open. I think all you have to do is look at June 2020. And I feel like the discussion changed. It's not changing among people of color, for the record. BIPOC people know and understand racism better than anybody. The discussion has changed now, where the dominant culture is now going through a process perhaps of awakening, enlightenment, and understanding. Certainly not everybody, but I think that, have we made progress? If talking about it is one way to measure it, then yes, we're talking about it. But when you talk about systemic racism, the fact that it took hundreds or more years to develop and create a system where racism is actually baked into our institutions, it will not be 1 year that undoes an entire history and legacy of racism. It just won't. What I hope is that the push keeps coming, that when people stop posting about it on social media, or it's not top of mind, or they're not thinking about George Floyd or Ahmaud Arbery, or the hundreds of Indigenous Canadians who have also faced terrible racism at the hands of police in this country, if we don't keep pushing, we're all going to kind of get comfortable in our status quo again. So do I believe there's progress? We've done something big, which is the conversation is happening, and you cannot fix that which you are not aware of. You cannot fix that which you cannot name. And I think we are still in the process for so many people of even understanding and recognizing all the ways that systemic racism affects our daily lives. So that doesn't sound hopeful, but on the other hand, it really is up to all of us who care, specifically allies, to keep this conversation going.
Yeah, and I think that's an important message. I mean, yeah, it might not sound entirely hopeful, but the point is how long this will take and how much work it will take. Sheann asks some question here about your own career experiences. So what were some struggles that you might have faced throughout your journey in your career as a woman in the sector that you work in, and how did you overcome them?
I think it's still a struggle. So I think the biggest ways that I have both, I will say this, I will call out my own privilege. I have benefited in many ways, not only being a woman, but also an ethnically ambiguous woman. And so, you know, when the discussion of diversity in newsrooms happen, in many ways, the fact that I am half Filipino, half Portuguese, it has actually benefited me in many ways in a newsroom, and certainly as a woman in a newsroom. And so I'll give you an example. Some of the stations that I worked for, some of the early days, they really wanted to push more diversity in front of the camera. Because I'm ethnically ambiguous, it kind of worked for some of the news directors, because they were like, well, people don't exactly maybe know what she is, and therein lies the ability to tick a diversity box. I know that sounds bizarre.
Mhm.
So in that sense, being multiracial benefited me because my ambiguity was a ticket in. I was an acceptable, diverse person because I could be white passing. What is she again? But we just know, like, she's not fully Caucasian, but like, so that actually benefited me, I believe, in some of the early days in my career. But as a woman in journalism, what often happens is you get pigeonholed into being assigned stories that they think is either in your beat or is lighter or fluffier. So for an example, you know, if there's sort of more harder crime stories, things of that nature, you know, organized crime or whatever, that's maybe not Melissa's beat. But man, let's talk about spring fashion. Let's talk about makeup stories. Let's talk. So maybe if it's a celebrity story, and so it's really easy for female journalists, at least in my experience in the early days, to get pigeonholed into covering certain beats and not being looked at as appropriate to cover other beats. That was also a function of age. Because even though I wasn't 19, I was in my mid 20s when I actually started with my first job in the industry. You know, I was still a very fresh, new novice reporter. So of course, some of the other stories were being given to the more seasoned reporters. But again, the nature of the interviews that you would be given versus some of your male counterparts, you had to be vocal to be like, I actually have interest in that. Can you please assign me? And to actually vocalize what your interests are, and that, yes, you can handle it. And no, that's not, I know you think it's a dangerous situation, but I'm going to conduct myself as best as I can, and I'm going to get the story for you. But the flip side is, being a woman, this is an industry about storytelling and earning trust with whose story you're telling. And so if you have that rapport, and sometimes people do feel a little bit more comfortable sharing with a woman. I don't want to say we're all better listeners, but that was certainly a skill that I utilized in the field when you were talking about really sensitive stories, particularly if someone lost their life or was murdered or an accident. You needed to have a soft touch and an empathetic ear to be able to get the truest, purest story of a victim. And that is where certainly being assigned as a woman did work for me. That doesn't mean you let your male reporters off the hook, however. I think a lot of that has changed over the years, but that was my experience when I started.
Thank you to the audience for some of these questions too, because these are all like picking up on this conversation. So we have another one. And also thank you, Melissa, for the shout out to the racially ambiguous out there. I think you're right. Okay, so we got another question here. What do you think the role of entertainment journalists might be in challenging systemic oppression within institutions? Or how do you see yourself contributing to challenging norms in your work specifically?
The Social is a lifestyle show. And so while we do, that means deal a lot with the entertainment space and Hollywood and movie and television and film and music, the lifestyle show allows us also to move into other spaces as well. And sometimes those spaces intersect. I mean, if we just talk about the last year as an example, when you take a look at the convergence of celebrity culture and Hollywood and the discussion on racial reckoning, and then specifically taking a look at what is happening in the entertainment industry itself. The entertainment industry is in and of itself an institution where racism is alive and well. And so I think when you talk about entertainment journalism and what its role is today, sure, it is covering the stories, but when you take a look at things like hashtag Oscars so white, when you take a look at The Weeknd boycotting the Grammys, when you talk about all of these actresses who are coming out against Harvey Weinstein, the intersection now and the discussions are not just about the projects, it is what's going on behind the projects. And so I have found, entertainment journalists now have almost gone into the realm of investigative journalism in some spaces when they are trying to uncover what are the systemically racist casting and hiring processes behind the camera, in front of the camera. How does power and privilege work in an industry where there is so much power and privilege and those who are very willing to wield it to their benefit and to the detriment of others? And so, yeah, we all need diversions. Gosh, do we need diversions? Do we need the movies and the music to just get away? And do we need that covered? Absolutely. And art unto itself, having people dedicated to the art that Hollywood produces, or Hollywood North, Canada produces, that's vital. But you're really finding now the versatility in entertainment journalism that is required to go deeper than just what others might deem a superficial story.
So we're getting a lot of questions about your career pivot from teaching to broadcast media. So I'll try and synthesize a few of them, but it does seem like the audience wants to hear a little bit more about when you made that choice, what advice you might have for people who are in that position of making a pivot like that, and what were the challenges you faced in terms of that decision going forward and how you then pursued the diploma in broadcast journalism.
It was the scariest and most exhilarating time of my life. So let me preface by saying let me go back. I was teaching. I left teaching to go start a master's in education, which I quickly learned. I had started a program in gender equity in education. I'm very, very passionate about gender equity as I was seeing it unfold and the inequities in the education system. When we talk about discrimination, listen, our institutions like education, surprise, surprise, not always as equitable as we would hope them to be. And certainly when in elementary schools where I was working, I could see that. When I had started the program and realized pretty quickly a few things were happening in my life, a long-term relationship was ending. I was burnt out from going straight from university straight into teaching. And the first several years of teaching are exhausting because you are trying to reinvent the wheel with your lesson planning, and it's just hard. No matter what politicians will tell you, teaching is so hard. Especially when you love it and are passionate about it, you just give your all to these kids. So I was exhausted. A relationship was ending. The program was not what I had hoped it to be. And when you talk about diversity, I was studying gender equity in education, and all my profs, God bless them, there were these older white men that we were having discussions, and I was just like, I think I need more, but maybe it's not here. Maybe this is just not the place. And so everything came to a head. I know people have written about the quarter life crisis. I don't know if it's true or not, but I can say that I felt like I experienced the quarter life crisis, which for those who are not aware, it's kind of like that moment where you're leaving school, starting to adult for real with a job and trying to take care of yourself maybe for the first time. And then the world feels like it's crashing down on you. That's the quarter life crisis. And that happened to me. And I am not a quitter. I'm very type A. The idea of leaving a master's program, which was so hard to get into, and just leave it, I was like, oh my God, who am I? I had to face my mother. because, you know, Filipinos and education, you don't mess around. And she was like, quit education? Like, what does that? I don't even understand what you're saying. People would die to be in this position. You know, and so I really was beating myself up. And yet the inner voice in me, call it intuition, call it your gut, call it a spiritual awake, call it whatever you want. That little voice was like, something big's got to change because this ain't working. And you're only 25. You got a whole life ahead of you. So fix this now. So all I knew was I needed to stop and reassess my whole life. Dumped the boyfriend, left my master's program and started intense therapy. He worked on Bay Street in Toronto. So that was like, he was a life coach, business coach, but he was actually a highly trained psychotherapist. So when I started to see him, I thought it was, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with my career. That's how I started. Mm-hmm. And then I think, you know, halfway through our first session, it was not about my career at all. It was about all the other things going on in my life. So 6 months, intensive therapy with him, with his coaching. And in that time, a reawakening and asking myself the big questions that maybe I didn't ask before and I should have, which is, what are your passions? What do you love to do? What could that be a career? And in that 6 months, determining that journalism, I always love the news. I love reading. I love writing. Like I said, I love grammar and I love good punctuation. I love a well-written piece. All those things. Never thought that journalism, especially with now my teaching background, could be a great fit. But by the end of those sessions, I said, this is my career path and I'm going for it. I did a very short internship. I knew somebody who was running the CTV Montreal affiliate. And I was like, let me just make sure this is what I want to do. I spent a summer in the newsroom. Holy cow, I was hooked. And I'll tell you something, my dad has that saying, when all the angels and saints are behind you, you know, it's like wind at your back. It was just like, boom. And I don't know that happens for everybody. That mm-hmm. happened for me. Mm-hmm. And from there on in, I have not stopped. It didn't matter. They were like, oh, you got to go back to school. Okay, great. Tell me anything and everything I have to do, because I have to do this for the rest of my life. And there it is.
Thank you for sharing that. I know I'm seeing some questions here about, you know, advice for new graduates who might be feeling lost, trying to find their niche. It does sound like it is a struggle. Like there's not one answer for how you go about figuring out what kind of career path you want to go along. But I think it is helpful to hear what at least one person's struggle and career path looked like. I got some other questions here. One about networking in Canadian media. It's an industry that's, you know, smaller than in the US and can maybe feel difficult to penetrate. Could you tell us a little bit about how you went about networking or learning about the sector as you were starting to make your way into the industry?
This is a great question because it is very hard to penetrate, and it is infinitely smaller than American markets where, you know, you can bounce around. You know, the money's way better in the States. Just want to flag that. Canadian TV. Hope you're not getting into it for the money. But anyway, no, it's a great question. I was very, very calculated and deliberate with how I went about making the transition from school into the industry. So what I had done was, while I had started my program, it was the Seneca at York Broadcast Journalism program. And when I had started, I already knew that at the end of the program, everybody had to do an internship and find a newsroom, newspaper, television, what have you, to do your internship in and to do those hours. I can't remember how many hours. When day one of my program, I already did the math. I looked around the room and I said, if I wait until the end or 3/4 through this year, and I wait to try to find a placement, I'm going to be competing with every single person in my class and then all the other schools around us who are probably doing the same thing. So day 2 of my program is when I started to reach out and find places that would accept me before the typical time slot that the students would be trying to run around and trying to find that slot for an internship. So I secured my internship before the first 2 weeks were done of my program. because I had less competition. So that was calculated choice number one. Calculated choice number two was where I was applying to. Because an internship, ideally, in the perfect world, gets your first step into the door and maybe even a job offer. I mean, that's the perfect scenario, getting experience, but maybe getting a job offer. So one of the places that I applied to, which was my number one on the list, was at the time called the New VR in Barrie, Ontario. I did that because it's in, even though I think it's considered a medium market because Barrie is a big city, it's not a large market by comparison to Toronto. And it's far. I luckily had a car. I knew right away, not everyone is going to, it's just numbers, right? Not everyone's going to be able to get up to Barrie. My parents live between my apartment in Toronto and Barrie. So I luckily had that option that I knew I had. But I specifically really pushed for that as my internship because it was then owned by Chum. Chum at the time also owned City TV. Goals. I had a goal of becoming a reporter on City TV. And so the fact that it was the same owner with this affiliate in Barrie, I said, if everything goes well, they're going to be like, we got to hire this intern, do my time, get the mileage and the experience on air in Barrie. And then maybe, hopefully, if a job becomes open in the city, the goal for most reporters in this province is to get to a big market, which is Toronto, the biggest market in Canada. So I kind of drew the map and said, if it all goes well, and guess what? My God, it went even better than I had planned. So I was very calculating and I was very deliberate, but that was also a function of the fact that some of the students that I was in class with were 18 and 19, and I was 25. Already had all my education and already a career started under my belt. So those are those moments when it's like, was that wasted time? Of course not. It's called life experience. And that paid off in that specific move to get into the industry. So be very discerning, be open, go where you need to go. I was driving from downtown Toronto, sometimes my parents' place. I was on the road at 2:30 in the morning, because I was doing the morning show. I was interning on the morning show. Is that glamorous? No, some people just don't want it. But I always say the walls are only there to keep people out who don't want it badly enough. And I was going to do absolutely anything I needed to do to break into the industry. So I took the worst shift ever in television because nobody else likes to do those shifts, but I did, and ended up in a job offer before I even finished my broadcast journalism program.
And I think that answers the question about getting your foot in the door. So for a lot of our students, I think the opportunity is through school. If you have an opportunity to do a work placement or an internship, not only getting that experience, but it also is a possibility of getting your foot in the door, and also learning about whether you even like that career path.
And I do want to add one more thing. If you're in it and you decide you love it, right? The one thing I told myself every day of my internship and my placement in that newsroom was, I want to work so hard and be so good. They're going to ask themselves, how can we live without her? We can't. And so being an intern, it's a very daunting position because you're the new kid. There's a lot of experienced people around you. You might be the youngest person in the room. There's so much intimidation. You're like, what do I know? I'm inexperienced. I'm new. Nuh-uh. That is not the right attitude to have. You go in there with humility, no doubt, because you do have a lot to learn and you are not a know-it-all. But you go in there with the spirit of, how can I use my position here to be indispensable to those people? And I'll give you one quick example. The first week or two of my internship, a terrible tragedy unfolded. You may recall when several Mounties were shot dead in Alberta. That story broke. And I remember instantly when I sat in on the morning meeting and it was like, okay, what do we need to do? What are the resources we need to gather? Who do we need to interview? What are the contacts on the ground? Whatever. As I'm listening to this meeting, I'm over here on my computer and I'm trying to find pictures to match the names that have just been released of all of the injured or killed officers. So while this meeting is happening, I'm already sourcing stuff we're going to need. You've got to be 2 steps ahead. And so I sourced every single photo of every single officer who sadly had been injured or killed in that shooting. By the time the meeting was over, I said, hey, listen, who can I send these to? I have all the photos of all of the RCMP officers. And the news director said, who told you to do that? And I thought, oh, I'm in trouble. And I said, well, I was listening to you and you said we're going to need, and I just found these all on the RCMP website. And he was like, good for you. So you see, the idea is don't wait to be told. You make yourself useful and you find the places where you can fit. Newsrooms have been slashing budgets. It is a really tough time to be a journalist because there's so few resources and they're shrinking every day. So if you want to make yourself indispensable, you fill in those gaps with good old-fashioned work ethic.
Somebody did want to know about that work ethic and also how you balance that off with life commitments, being a mother, living in your house and working in your house. So I guess the question here is, how do you make work-life balance a priority in your life?
There's no such thing as work-life balance in my life. There's juggling. I can juggle real good. Like I got a PhD in juggling. Do I have a PhD in balance? Nope. I will not sit here and lie to your viewers that I got it figured out. I don't. And I think that honesty is very liberating, because I think once here's the risk. I spent most of my 20s and 30s at the time, I wasn't married, and I didn't have a child at the time. And my only focus at that stage of my life was building my career. And luckily I had the time and the energy to do that. And so I did what was necessary at the time because I didn't have other obligations at that point. And so for me, I went for it hard. And do I regret it? The only thing I regret is that I did not take care of myself as well as I should have. Did I get everything I got in my career because I just busted my chops in those years? I did. So there was no balance those days. I was just working. I would work 14 hours a day. When we launched CP24, when there was a split in the industry, this is a long story, I won't bore you, but when there was a split in the industry and CTV bought CP24 from Chum, City TV, there was a major split in the industry. I left City TV, which I did gain my goal, by the way, of getting down to Toronto and City TV, check. But when the split was happening in the industry, I wanted to be at CP24, but my contract wasn't letting me. In the end, when I landed at CP24, I did so because I wanted to help build a new 24-hour news channel in Toronto. I wanted to be a part of that. So it was me and Ann Romer. We were the first two people hired. And guess what? Covering news in this entire region with two people, we were doing 14-hour days, 16-hour days, but I was never happier. I wasn't complaining. I was like, more breaking news. Where? I could not do that today. So what was the downside of that? Burnout. Because once I hit the wall, guys, I hit it real hard. I'm still recovering. So I think that life slowed me down. When I got married, I was still working really hard, but when the journey started happening, I started thinking about, okay, do I want to have children and how is that going to work? And then we had struggled with infertility, and all of a sudden life started to give me signs where it was like, pump the brakes, Grello, you've done a lot. Stop and smell the roses for a second. You've achieved a lot. But I was always that person that wanted next. I was never satisfied with what I had. And on the one hand, key to my success. On the other hand, you're never satisfied. So every person out there is different. Today, I don't have balance, but I definitely know I have perspective. And so I know when work is too much and my daughter's watching me because she doesn't get mommy time, you have choices to make. And those are actually really hard because I do love my career so much, but things have changed. And so a little person relies on me now. And so I'm not balancing. I'm juggling. I'm doing one thing at one time. I'm juggling this over here. Oh, wait, and I have a husband. I guess he needs some attention sometimes too.
Yeah, I mean, it does come down to choices, and you've got various degrees of agency in terms of how you can make those choices. But yeah, there are challenges, I think, probably throughout a career in terms of thinking about life and work. We are getting close to time, but I did want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about something that, when we talked previously was important to you. It was talking a bit about being a graduate, being an alumni from the university and wanting to give back. Could you tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on this?
This is a really important thing I wanted to talk about, because it is, as we talk about, the hustle game that so many people who are watching are in or are about to enter, or, they're having maybe their own quarter life crises, and it's really hard to see where your path is going to end up. And the big question is, am I going to be okay? Right? That's always a big question.
Mhm.
Am I going to be okay? And I think that the one thing that this old wise lady can pass along to you is, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And I want people to realize that your own personal success, which is probably all encompassing right now, which is, I just want to get a job. I just want to be stable. I just want to be able to take care of myself, or, whatever. Everyone's priorities are a little different right now, but there is that similarity of like jumping into independence and jumping into your career in earnest, is that your success is so important, but it will become, as you will realize in your career, once you finally crack through whatever it is that you want to crack through, and I believe in you and I know you will, it is the idea that our personal success in a vacuum doesn't mean a whole lot unless you are able to really help somebody else in their journey also. I'm here speaking today because my life, all of our lives, it's rarely a straight line. Most of our lives go like this. And I'm here to tell you that I am walking living proof that rarely is the linear line, which is the safe line, going to be the one that's going to lead you to your ultimate, goals and destination. So my journey at York University started because I also was the recipient, and I applied for and received an entrance scholarship at York University. And that was a huge incentive for me to choose York, because it felt very welcoming. Like, you want me there. You want me there. You want me to learn with your institution. And someone, because of their generosity, really helped smooth that path for me to be able to make it and achieve my educational goals at York. Now, as I'm in this position, and as I get a little bit older with more life experience, it's one thing for me to have all these check marks, like, oh yeah, I attained that goal, I attained that goal. At a certain point in your life, and maybe for some of you it will happen way earlier than it did for me, was to look around you and say, I've been really lucky in many ways. I've struggled, but I'm really lucky. How can I make somebody else's journey be a little bit easier so that they can even achieve more than I can achieve? And that is how humanity helps the next generation and the next generation. It is by looking back and saying, I know it was rough for me, but I hope I can make it a little bit easier for you so that you can soar even higher. And so I recently made the decision, since the racial reckoning, to be quite honest, of June 2020, I started to sit and think, what I've attained and succeeded in my life means a heck of nothing if I can't look back and think I helped other people in whatever way felt right to me. So at that time, I started to realize higher education is a key to independence and to the world, in my opinion. And I was lucky to have that. And I want to be able to make that path a little bit easier for other people out there as well. So I reached out to York and I said, I would like to create a scholarship or a bursary or a grant of some sort to also give back to a student what I was given when I first applied to York, which was a financial shot at starting my educational career.
Mhm.
And so with the help of several amazing members on the York University team, I've created a scholarship. It is specifically targeted to BIPOC women who are in the interest or studying in the interest of economics or STEM. And I've decided to provide as much as I am financially able to contribute to the education of a young woman who is Black or Indigenous or a person of color who is wanting to enter a field where there probably is very few people, if any, that look like her. And that is my way that I wanted to share with people that your success is great for you and maybe your immediate family, but to me, legacy now means how do you help your own community? How do you help those around you to also get the same shot? And truly, if we want to talk about equality, it is, there's no shortage of talent in every single community, but my God, there is a shortage of equal opportunities for all of those people in all of those communities. So if there's any small thing that I can do to help level the playing field, then that will be hopefully a legacy that I want to leave behind. And most importantly for my daughter, she's 7, but I want her to know that there's a scholarship with mom's name on it because she wanted to help other young women to succeed in university.
This is really helpful advice because I think we often think about career planning as, you know, using a bit of forethought and thinking about what kind of career goal you want. But I don't know if we do enough attention on thinking about future giving. You know, once you get into that career path, how are you going to help others get into it? So this is a really great story to hear. We do have a few minutes left and there's so many questions in here. Thanks so much, everybody, for posting these.
I appreciate it. I really do.
I'll take this last one here from Samantha, who's asking for advice on those who might be encountering burnout while working from home. Any tips? What do you do to overcome that or to counteract the risk of burnout?
This is a hard one because burnout, it looks different for different people, but I would say generally, at least for me, because I've literally been living and working in the same 4 walls, I have my go-to things. You know, when it comes to self-care, I really struggle with anxiety. In fact, I started with panic attacks when I was actually at York University, and I actually went to go see one of my profs for care because I was really pushing myself hard. Like I said, type A, but it's not just because I was type A. And I find myself at the beginning of the pandemic, I started to really fall into that again. And the anxiety really started to bubble up and the panic attacks. And so burnout, which is part of that whole picture as well, is your body's way of telling you something's really off kilter. For me personally, my outlet is exercise, movement as medicine. And so the harder I'm stressed, the harder I work out. For me, it is a release of all of that mismanaged and misdirected energy that I literally feel in my brain and in my body, and it affects my sleep and it affects my mood. Now that the weather is getting better, it is so simple to say, but even if you live in a condo, go try to find some green space to be. Studies are undeniable, my friends, of the power of nature to revitalize you. So get out of the 4 walls, go for a walk in nature wherever you can find it. Exercise, because we're so, like, this is my life, right? Like I sit and that's not good for me. It's not good for my body. It's not good for my brain. I need an outlet. So find your outlet. For some of my friends, they've picked up painting. You know, there's got to be something where the phones are away. You allow yourself to unplug, whether you get lost in a good book or in a good hiking trail. For me, it is about doing something other. As much as I love being with all of you, the first thing I'm going to do when I'm done is I'm going to take my dog and we're going to go to the park. And oh yeah, that's the other part. I got a COVID canine, right? Because that has also been proven by science to help. I'm getting my 10,000 steps in a day. I'll tell you that, because she's a Doberman. Girl needs to run. You know, so there are these things, and everyone's life is so different, and the challenges we're all facing are so different. But I think it is important to get back to those basics, to put the phone away, to get out into nature, to get moving, watch what you're feeding yourself, because that affects mood major. Just ask any parent of a child how important diet is. And I think it's those real, it doesn't have to be rocket science. Just listen to yourself and give yourself what you need, even if it's for 20 minutes a day, whatever you've got. Everyone's lives are really, really different and crazy today.
Those are very admirable outlets and very healthy outlets. I will confess, I've been eating a lot of different kinds of potato chips. So that's been pretty
I
good
get
too
it.
on my end.
I get it. I ain't gonna be mad. I get it.
We are at time. I want to thank you, Melissa, for sharing your stories and your advice. And I want to thank everybody who attended the session here today for all your questions. Apologies to everyone who I couldn't get through all the questions that we had here, but you were all really well engaged and we really appreciate it. For those of you who have been watching the Moving Forward series, you can go back and watch some of the earlier interviews that we've done over on the Liberal Arts and Professional Studies website, which has just been posted up in the chat room there for those who might be interested. Thanks again, Melissa, and thanks for everyone for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Bye, everybody.